Right, another random video again, kind of making just sort of anything until I get back to the big projects. War Machine is still in progress, however, a lot of it looks kind of messy, especially the chest and the back, which are the pieces I've been working on. They don't look too amazing, so I'm going to try and get them looking a lot better before I put them on here to show people. But for today, I'm going to be making Star-Lord's guns. Now, I've already got a Star-Lord cosplay, and I've worn it quite a few times to Comic-Con. And I've already actually got a pair of guns, but the thing is they're very big and they're very heavy as well. So today I'm going to go about making my own pair and walk you through the process. This is the gun that I use for my cosplay, and just from me picking it up you can probably tell that it is pretty big, and you obviously can't tell how heavy it is, but trust me when I say it's a pretty heavy prop to be carrying around most of the day. It's not super heavy, but it is heavier than I want it to be. I just bought these off the internet, and these are some holsters that I made for it. This was a bit of a test, but they look like this in the end anyway. I 3D printed these off Thingiverse. They were just a free file that I found, and I think they were originally meant for the Nerf versions of these, which are obviously a little bit smaller and a lot lighter as well. When I went to Comic-Con on the day, that broke, and in turn this fell off and the end smashed off and split into loads of pieces. There were still a few pieces that I couldn't find, I didn't manage to pick up, so I would actually like to fix this one day, but thinking about it, because of how big and heavy it is, I thought I'd probably just make my own pair, and that way they can be a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, and I can carry them around on my hips no problem. So I went onto My Mini Factory and downloaded a free STL file for Star-Lord's guns from a maker called Kirby Downey, who has made some incredible files, let me just say. Then started printing them out. I've got two printers, so I set both of them going, printing separate pieces to get it done just a little bit more quickly, and was able to get pretty much the entire thing printed in just under a day. I did end up printing one of the parts for the handles for the gun with some support structure, because otherwise it wouldn't have printed properly. Fortunately, support structure is easy enough to take off, so all I did was peel this off of my hands. After I'd done that, I did realise there was a few little areas where it was still a little bit rough looking, so I took some fine grit sandpaper and just sanded those down, trying my best to get any rough or straggly looking areas cleaned up before I painted this. I also noticed on a few of the other pieces that I printed that there were some rough looking areas where there had been a slight overhang, so I just used a small craft knife I had to cut away the pieces of the curled up parts of the plastic, and then went over it again with a file just to make it a little bit more smooth. Now, I didn't file this completely smooth because I didn't want to risk damaging any more of this prop or wearing away more than I really wanted to, so instead I just filed this about as smooth as I could get it, and then used some all-purpose filler to fill in the rest of the gaps. Now, a word of advice, I wouldn't necessarily recommend all-purpose filler. I'm only using it for smaller jobs like this, and I do use it on some of my other 3D prints, but for bigger jobs I probably use something like wood filler that's a little bit more robust, a little bit more reliable maybe. All-purpose filler tends to crack, even when it's dry, like really easily. I'm only using this because it was super cheap and I've got a lot left over, so I kind of needed to use it up, but it is by no means a bad option, just there are better things out there, so just be aware of that. And the next thing to do is glue this all together. Now, I should mention that whilst this was only 4 pieces in the files, I did end up slicing one of the pieces. This is the sort of top handle for the gun, as you can see here, and the top part kind of overlaps a little bit, so all I did was slice that off and then glued it together a little bit later on. Now, I only sliced it this way because I wanted both pieces to have a flat surface to print on, instead of risking using too much support structure or anything like that and risking making more of a mess than would really have been worth it. And then I can just glue these pieces together a little bit later on, and I find that the slice line is a lot more concealed. You probably wouldn't even be able to tell unless you took a super close up look at this prop. I found this was a better place to do it rather than right down the middle or across somewhere like the hole where the trigger is. And to glue it all together, I use this hard plastic adhesive. I use this for pretty much all my 3D prints. You can pick this up super cheap at sort of any DIY place, and you only need to wait a few minutes after applying it to start gluing the pieces together. And I used this small clamp to hold everything in place and steady whilst the glue cured. I then propped it up underneath some scrap foam I had lying around, and then came back a little bit later and repeated the process for the rest of the parts. And this is what they look like when they're all put together. So the next thing to do is fill these and then paint them. So I got my all-purpose filler again and filled in the places that had the most obvious visible gaps. This is mainly just where it's been glued together, where pieces were separate. After all that was done, it was time to move on to painting, so I looked back on my old prop gun to see which colours I would need the most, and we can tell from this it's mainly black, gold, silver, and sort of a more brushed, darker silver colour. So I got the 4 closest colours I had. Fortunately I already had these, so I didn't have to go out and buy any, and then painted it, taping up the areas as I went along. And this is what it looks like almost completely finished. There's still a few more things I need to do, so I grabbed some squeezy paint and a small brush just to fill in some small detail areas. And this is what the final design looks like. The little areas I hit with the brush are these little holes and the ends that are silver as well. Another thing I did was cover them in some matte lacquer spray paint, only to protect them a little bit, because if I'm taking them on and off my holsters all day, they're inevitably going to get scratched up and worn down a little bit, so this is just to protect them against wear and tear. Speaking of holsters, I still needed to make a pair. Now, even though I'd changed them originally to suit my bigger guns, I still kept the original file just in case I needed them for any reason in the future, which fortunately came in handy, and these fit the newer guns pretty much perfectly. So, that wraps it up. Thanks for watching.